pulled
Bus
up to
drop.
pick kids up, so they
Yeah.
were, that wash my hands.
Oh, wait, hold on.
Hey, Joy. You as well. It's a beautiful night for a drive. Sky is beautiful. You don't think it's wrong for a while.
Get a raise.
Okay, so what we've got, if you're digitally projecting, okay, we'll let you,
We'll do it right there.
okay?
When I say we, it's the collective we, Matthew.
There you go.
That's right over my head.
This is kind of the main thing.
No, I can't read the glasses. No.
Let's see if we can't read the glasses off.
It's a new thing.
It's like something decaf coffee. Yeah, what's stronger, we'll take that. Otherwise,
Yeah, so that's.
it's in one of those pockets.
Oh, well, maybe. But you.
Absolutely.
No, this is.
He's trying to sign me out. I'm just doing it. Okay.
Very dynamic.
Yeah.
So the front entrance at high school.
That's why
Yeah, the last time we had it, that is what we ended up. And we made slight changes to it. What? I got it. Where it has. Did you? Nicely done. More clearly that or in the slide box. That's what we came to the public with.
So more like
DC West
front row seats, I see.
Which is actually.
We put the people who don't pay attention right up front here.
Really central core.
I do.
To maximize that.
I know, but
That's the best I've done this thing.
It seems to me there was some.
Yeah.
And I should see that house. That's the side of that.
Oh, don't worry.
On the outside, it's having pillars.
Oh, yeah.
Just finish this one.
Yeah.
Where'd they pull that from?
72 degrees today and
Isn't that crazy?
No, I can.
30 on Saturday.
No. I'll take today. Yeah.
I didn't need to know about that next.
Sorry, man. I saw that and I was like, how can that happen? But I guess.
We're a little spoiled right now. So let's-
I was in my own through,
So what is related? It's related to.
Oh.
No, she's going to next.
That's why I was supposed to say.
Saturday.
Not the ideal for me on the highway,
It's not coming sideways, that's right.
Okay, so getting us all back, we're going to move along with our second presentation of the night. As I said, we're very fortunate to have two very experienced and qualified architectural firms in our state that design all across the nation. And so BCDM brings a little bit different flavor to that. I'll let them explain. But two great guys here with us this evening to talk about their firm and what value they feel like they can bring to our project. So we did have a chance to kind of visit with them a little bit at State School Board Convention and ask some initial questions and felt very confident about their ability to build a good relationship and move forward with us. So I'll introduce Pat Carson and Matthew Arion. I'm never quite sure.
I appreciate you letting me do it.
Yeah. All right.
Well, thank you,
It's all
Jason.
yours. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having us here tonight. We're gonna try to keep this to about 15 minutes, and we tried to put some things together to tell you kind of who we are and what we do. But this is meant to be very conversational, so if you have a question about anything that we're talking about, don't feel like you're gonna throw us if you ask us something, because you can't throw us. All right. So tonight, obviously, so I'm Pat Carson. I've been at BCDM for about 30 years. Matthew here is also BCDM, joined us relatively recently. But we've been doing schools, if you go next one, Matthew. BCDM were established in '76. I started in '92. We're about 30 people. I know, not to talk about the competition, but I know Vanessa and Aaron. They're great people. DLR does great work. One of the big differences between our firms. They're a different firm than we are, just in our physical size. So 30 people, we have architects, interior designers, structural engineering. Some of our supporting engineers we bring in as consultants. And so what we do with that is we work with our clients to identify who the best partners are. It's not just the people we have, it's reaching out and finding those partners. We'll talk a little bit about that later. About 80% of our work, though, is in the world of architecture for education. And the vast majority of that is in the K-12 market. We do work at the university level as well. We do state colleges and community colleges, but it's mostly K-12 that's kept us going over the years. One of our sayings is we see clients rather than projects. Probably 80% of that market of architecture for education are people who come back to us year after year. Some examples of that, Papillion La Vista Schools, we've done all of their work since 1984. We do a ton of work for most of our clients. It's pretty rare that we do a one-time project, and usually it's just because it might be a community that only needs a project every 30 or 40 years. What's important to us is relationships and not the buildings proper. We're part of all kinds of groups, but so is DLR, so I won't spend a whole lot of talking about that. We all go to the same conferences. Jason might have mentioned, right now Omaha Public Schools is building 2 new $80 million high schools. DLR is doing one, BCDM is doing the other, if that makes sense to them.
Even DC West.
Even DC West, absolutely. Speaking of DC West, our relationships, not to bore you with all the different people that we've worked with, we just thought we'd pull out a few that maybe are more interesting. Melissa at DC West, I think, could speak to our relationship and the kind of work that we try to do. Right now we happen to be building a very large elementary for Lincoln Public Schools. Scott Wieskamp is their director of facilities. Scott could tell you his thoughts. Millard Public Schools, we're in the middle of helping them with a bond campaign that's finishing construction. Chad Meisgeier is our CFO. Any of those three or any of our other clients, I think we would be welcome to give you a longer list if you wanted to call and just ask about us.
Are you?
Do things.
I see Ralston. Are you?
Yeah.
For their new.
We are. So yeah, we're doing their bond. So their bond is really one new elementary school at Mockingbird, and so working with Doc Adler and those folks, they're further along in the process. A lot of their projects are more taking their existing buildings that are those 1970s open plans, and we're just closing them off, open to closed concepts. And so they haven't passed a bond in 22 years, and so it's a big deal for them that they passed it, and they're very excited to be out there.
So we love showing photos. You can go to our website and see some of our work, but we just wanted to share with you a few important aspects of what we've done here. Specialized programs, we have a good variety of specialized programs that we look at, creating things that are very unique to school districts, kind of those niche markets. This is JP Lord in Omaha. It's for severe and profound special needs students. So we have a good breadth of knowledge from all extremes there. Another project that we work on is children's spaces, obviously. Schools are very important to us, as Pat mentioned, and students are younger, and that inspirational type, colorful, vibrant spaces. Those are all types of spaces that we want to create for those end users here. And so children's environments of all kinds are very important to us. And obviously, we focus in on making those spaces that anyone would want to be in. And then obviously, life after high school, we need to plan on whether you're career ready or college ready. We want to prepare all those students. And again, this just kind of shows kind of those extreme instances. This is 21st century. A lot of these are more career oriented, but again, color, the vibrancy, and a place that you want to be here. And these are just 3 of the slides and 3 different types of aspects that we explore, but wanted to share with you kind of our portfolio and a quick snapshot here. One of the things I will mention with these projects, we're proud of the fact that the team, that Pat and I and the rest of the office, we're within 20 feet of almost everybody that worked on all of these projects here. And we take a great deal of pride in knowing that we can ask questions, talk to each other, and what we're showing you we've done as a team together, and we can replicate that here. And so I think that's something that kind of makes us unique and kind of allows us to be pretty nimble when we work with clients there. So we want to kind of talk, that's us. We can talk about us, actually not very long. We don't like to do that very long. But we want to kind of talk about our approach, kind of coming in on a high level here, our approach that we think might be important for Beatrice. We may be wrong in it, but we're just taking some stabs here. But when we look at this, we really want to focus on 2 things today. We know you guys have a lot of long-term goals, from an education standpoint, pedagogical, operational, and then there's some short-term priorities that are probably driving some of those decisions right now. And what we want to do is kind of talk about what we would feel is kind of the process in order to kind of meet both of these needs and do justice to both of them, all right? So looking at that, we're going to start out with an exciting slide that shows a schedule here, all right? What we looked at is kind of conceptually a 30-month time frame for all of this to get completed, all right? Again, conceptual, very high level here. You can see a lot of different things kind of happening in this design phase, which is happening right here, and then the construction, obviously, that's happening. What we want to focus in on today is really that first part of this, right? That first, what we're going to call this jam session, in order to get that threshold of maybe starting something in July-ish, or maybe in the middle of 2022. And so we kind of want to outline right here in the process what those 3 steps are and how that involves your school district here. So looking at that here, we're calling this a jam session because we're going to condense it. This is usually a process that may take a little bit longer, half a year or so. But we want to have basically the 3 to 4 month jam session here. Concentrated design, which means people are going to be able to relay information. It's scheduled, it's structured, it's very collaborative, and ultimately the process is going to hopefully help net you something that's uniquely yours, right? And that is responding to what you need educationally for your staff and your students and your community here. And so we're going to term these three phases: understanding, learning, and creating. I know I added INGs on all 3 of those, but those are the 3 processes here. Looking at this first one, we're looking at December and January for this understanding part. One of the things that we want to do is kind of take a step back and say, what's important to you? I know you guys have had those conversations, but those are things that we are going to find very important in order to understand what you guys need, what you want, and what your priorities are, right? So looking at that, one of the things that we would propose is the same thing we do for a lot of school districts. Make this an engaging process. We don't know how many people would be engaged or what that size is, but we work with collaboration groups of 2 to 3, 200 to 300. We don't know what that mix is, but the important part is getting input from people who are going to be using that those key stakeholders and the people that are going to be impacted most by that school, which could be your constituents, your students, your staff, whoever that might be. The second part of this is kind of taking a step backwards, right? And saying, okay, we're going from multiple facilities potentially to something that's more centralized. What are those opportunities and those concepts that are going to now start to happen in that scenario? And what can we really start to leverage to make sure that our students are getting that education here? Maybe we might want to let's look at best practices versus being constrained and reacting to the environment that we have. Or can we enable a different kind of a culture that we weren't able to do before? Can we make this more student focused or integrate those programs and start to find those efficiencies from a programming and staffing standpoint also? And then I think this opportunity by going from multiple to centralized, there's a lot of ability to have that equitability that's so important. So when all those students go to that middle school level or the high school level, they're at the same plane of education here. So those are the opportunities that we would look at through that collaboration. We do a lot of different kinds of engagements or activities. One of the things that we would study is potentially a gap study. This is just an example, right? Showing different paradigms, right? So first, we ask, what's your current paradigm of education, right? Maybe it's strong in the individual, passive versus active, wherever you fall right now, right? But then the next conversation is, where's your desired paradigm by the time this is all through, or maybe in 5 to 10 years, right? Planning that far out here. Maybe those start to look a little bit different, and where that gap study helps you is, where's that difference, and where's that biggest delta? Because that probably is where your biggest opportunity may be in designing and looking at that environment, and how you approach education in that instance. So those are just a few of the things that we would do during that understanding standpoint. Just kind of get those goals and those opportunities and start to think about what this looks like. The next phase would be kind of learning, right? We want to be kind of on that same communication wave as you guys when we start to talk. We don't want to be the architects and you guys be the educators and there's a divide, right? We want to speak the same language. If collaboration means one thing to somebody and another, then we're speaking two different languages here. So this learning session has a lot of different ways of getting on that same vocabulary, right? We use tours, examples, and other references to kind of say, hey, here's what's out there. Here's things you might want to consider, because you don't build a new school every single day. You want to make sure you know what's out there, right? We talk about concepts, iterative processes to go from pros and cons and just start to talk about things quickly and to say, hey, this is a good idea because it does this and enables us to do this. And then lastly, but most importantly, this all involves dialogue and working together and collaborating. So you can get that collaboration, find out what those opportunities are, and start to get those goals really set and established physically now in some kind of a concept here. And then lastly is the create part. And this is what all architects are known for, right? Drawing and creating buildings and designing things. And this is fun for us, all right? We do enjoy this. But the create part is equally as important for you guys, because that's part of the process of learning, how am I going to use this new building, right? It's not just going to be presented to me. How do I learn? What's the professional development that's going to need to take place to get to that? So this create part is really pretty important to us. And we want to talk to you about 4 different kind of tools that we use to help customize that environment, but still have that efficient process for that kind of that milestone that we're looking at here.
So one of the components we're going to talk about tonight is site adapt. This happens to be a school that we've done, we're putting with Vista Schools. We've done 7 versions of this in the last 20 years, and each has grown and morphed a little bit. But if I were to show you all 7, you'd probably say they look pretty darn similar. So there's a benefit to site adaptation. But what we find, maybe go to the next one, and this happened to be Ashbury. It was just finished. Maybe one thing that's interesting about this school, if you're familiar with ICF construction, which is insulated concrete forms, it's a very energy efficient way to build a building. This school is the first and only school in the state of Nebraska that has that. And so they're going to have very low utility costs going forward. So we can talk about that in more discussion later. But part of that, doing that site adaptation, sometimes it's not about cold copying a building, because I think it'd be wrong for us to say that we could take a building that was designed for another district and it would be as successful as you would want it to be for your district. But what we found is we can take components of that. So in the next piece, what we call the kit of parts idea. So in the school that you see there, That was actually a school we did in Springfield, Missouri called Harrison Elementary. So the orange area is classroom wings, the green is kind of a performance wing, the blue is kitchen area. And we can work with those parts, and if those parts can be vetted properly, maybe they're arranged differently to suit your needs better. Maybe something's made bigger, maybe something's made smaller, but it's something that you can relate to, that we can do with a certain amount of design efficiency to get us there, but it can be uniquely applicable to Beatrice. So this is just showing pulling those kit parts together. One other thing to think about is flexibility and growth. This happens to be the plan of what's under construction right now for Lincoln Public Schools at Robinson Elementary. So the image that you see on the left-hand side is what's under construction. You'll see a dashed line over on the right hand. Then in the upper corner you see is an orange. So what they are building is a 4-unit elementary school now, but they think that it's going to need to be a 6-unit later. So we designed the building so when that 6th unit comes on board, we actually build this addition, we redistribute the spaces in here so that we still have, 6 classrooms for the second grade cluster. They're not spread out. The opposite way of doing this is what's done in a lot of schools, where maybe something is expanded out individually in multiple areas, but there's a lot of inefficiency for construction costs with those concepts. So one of the things we want to test in terms of flexibility and growth is not only what are your needs for today, what are your needs for tomorrow? How can we set up the building so it's easily adaptable for those things that we don't know sitting here are going to be challenges you're going to face in 10 years and 15 years. That's all going to roll into what we want to propose for your district.
And then the last topic we want to talk about when we talk about the create part is creating that process so you can be kind of goal-oriented. We're showing this pyramid here, and we do mean it here. The most important is the education and the students, right? And using that goal-oriented method, people can start to focus not on what they're going to be doing, but what's best for their students, right? Needs and priorities needs to be a collaborative process so you can kind of understand why those decisions are being made the way they are. It's so important so you don't go backward in the process and you can do that process in the right order here. Our process really does focus in on the why, and it's enabling whoever is part of that collaborative process to understand, okay, this makes sense, this is why this decision. And so they can really start to help other people understand why the plan is the way it is and help teach them how to use it and the benefits of it. And then concepts, and then eventually a floor plan. Normally you would think of it kind of backwards, but this is the process that we want to do, and if from a standpoint of helping move along for that July threshold, and maybe that's the wrong date or so, but it will help quicken the process and allows for the why before the what actually starts to happen here. So with that, I'll take this, sorry. We wanted to keep this short so we could have a question and answer process here, but really why BCDM? As Pat mentioned, relationships do matter to us. Our repeat clients are very important to us because we enjoy working with them.
Yeah.
We enjoy that excitement of developing things for their students and their communities. It's probably the most joyful thing we do on a day-to-day basis here. We do understand education, and we know how it's changing, what it needs, and how to react to certain communities and the differences and the nuances that happen between there. And I think listening is one of our biggest responsibilities, is not to take something that we've done before, but to listen to what you have. Make it efficient, but get something that is uniquely yours here. And this is our work around Nebraska. This is a very important area to us. Our reputation is really important. And not just from a business standpoint, but we want you to know that we put our best effort into it. And the team that you have here, like I said, it's done all the work that we showed you here.
Absolutely.
And then partnership, and again, the student part and the learning environments, those are all incredibly important to us and basically what excites us every single day as we get to work for our clients here.
Absolutely.
So with that,
Yeah, we'd like to open it up for questions and specific things you might have questions for us on. We tried to stay fairly generic, not knowing what you wanted to dive deeper on, but we're happy to try to dive deep.
we can answer any questions, as Pat said.
Matthew can answer any questions. I can answer certain questions.
How confident, I'll just jump in, how confident are you in the ability to maybe take some concepts that you might have, your kit of parts, is that?
Mhm.
to take your kit of parts and adapt that relatively quickly to what our time frame, as you're pretty much spot on, Matthew, as to what our time frame may be.
I think we're very confident in that. I gotta be honest, if you were doing this project, traditional design bid build, I wouldn't be as confident. But my understanding is you're interested in construction manager at risk, which allows us to do multiple packages. So it's not uncommon, you know, when we get to say June or July, we know enough that we can grade the site, that we can put in foundations. We haven't figured out what every piece of cabinetry or every outlet needs to be. We have time to do those. Under the design bid build, you sort of have to have everything done by, say, May. That's probably not gonna happen. With CMR, if you break those packages up, it gives you time to, not a lot of time, but enough time to make the right decisions, to be confident in the decisions that you're making, that you're not overlooking anything. And so having that kit of parts helps that. Having the construction manager at risk delivery method helps that. So yeah, I feel very confident that by summer we can have something under construction.
Was I looking at that correctly, that it'd be 2 years before you could be in a building then?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
To cut to the chase, yes.
Now, that's 2 years from start of construction, or 2 years from the start of this process?
A little bit of both. It depends on how, we can make decisions, for example, if we are to use tilt-up concrete, that's for the wall system, that's a quicker way to do it. That could shave time off down the road. You know, generally, if we're gonna start construction in the summer, you're probably, I'm guessing that you wouldn't want to move into a new facility mid-school year. And so it's probably gonna be the following fall before you can get into it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
We have open schools mid-school year. I think it's a challenge for our clients who choose to do that, but that's a choice that all of you would make.
Do you have some samples of schools like the size of what we're talking about that we can look at?
Not with us today, no. And frankly, I would tell you at 1,000 students, we don't do a lot of, well, we do middle schools at that level, but at an elementary, in our markets, the Lincoln School will get up to close to 1,000 when it's built out, finally. But most of the schools that we work in, just to be completely honest, are probably in this 500, 600, 700 student range. So it's somewhat unusual to be building a school at this capacity level.
So Leavenworth.
Fort Leavenworth is one, down in Kansas, on the base. MacArthur was the name of the school. That's another example. So there are a couple, but there aren't a million of them to show you.
Go back to that slide that looks like, where you get to like move the little pieces around. I thought that was kind of interesting. What are some other ways you can do that?
I mean, in our mind, the kit of parts can be reassembled to meet your site. We can look at lots of different buildings. This is just showing the concept of it. So absolutely, if that's what we want to understand, or what are the pieces of the puzzle that you need, and then how can we arrange them in a way that makes the most sense for your district.
Generally, when you're looking at like a kit of parts, the areas that you have probably the most opportunity to change or to develop probably would be the classroom suites, how you handle that entry and that lobby and that circulation media center. And those are the ones that you would spend time on in this case, and some of the ones that are a little bit more set, like kitchens, commons that are based off of
cafeterias,
gyms even and lockers.
right?
Those are all things that are probably a little bit more set. And when I say set, it's based off of numbers and quantity really that drives that design, a lot of it. And obviously proximities to other spaces too, so.
So with this, you would look at our site and then from there you would come up with a configuration on the basis of our conversations that you think would fit on
Yeah,
that site.
sometimes we'll do it in a planning exercise. We'll do it old school. We'll bring the pieces as cutouts, right, and lay it on the table, and just everybody collectively slide the pieces around. Where does this make sense? Why does, Jason can explain why you put that room next to that room. What relationship are you trying to get to? And by having that conversation, it allows other people to ask questions, to give input. And so we'll do that exercise for a few hours and come up, okay, this is a configuration that makes sense. Let's take a picture of it. do it again, take a picture of it, maybe you have 5 or 6 of those. Then you broadcast up and say, okay, which of these have the most merit? But again, you're working with parts that have kind of been already vetted, is what I'm trying to say. So that you're not starting from scratch. You're not starting from, we have the basic relationships done, but how do we bring these together in a way that's maximizing the opportunities that you're going to have in this building for the next 40, 50 years?
So one of the first things I think we would probably look into is, from a scale standpoint on this building, outside of trying to fit it on site, is what are those ideal team configurations that you'd be looking for? Is it, if it's 6 sections, do you break that down into a grade level team, or maybe teams of 3? How does that start to look like from a mentorship standpoint, from trying to get age groups together? Those are all those kind of nuances that build that culture of your new elementary, and we want to spend some time to make sure that we got that right. And those are those orange areas, right, to see which ones need to go together and how do we break them up or size them or scale them to be appropriate for what you want to do.
Can you give us an example of a school that has the culture they wanted to set and then the design they used to create that culture?
Not with us right now, but I can walk
Let me
through.
just explain, yeah.
So I will mention the school district. It's in central Iowa, and it's a very similar size. It was 1,100 elementary students here. They had 3 facilities in their district, and they were trying to centralize again their students. What they wanted to do was give a sense of community to everybody. So everyone, their biggest issue was this school A had a lot more resources than school C, and so that equitability part of it played into it highly. And so what they did is, in the configuration that we worked on, we really made it so every single grade had the same access to all the amenities and all the specials, and all the students had that opportunity to be with their peers, maybe the special needs, but they were very close in proximity, which is very different than what they were used to. So the special education wasn't somewhere over here. It was very much integrated, and you would never be able to tell really the difference between one space or another. So that's a way that culture of everybody has that same opportunity was kind of established in the plan. I'm sorry, I'm drawing with my hands here. That's not an easy
Go
way.
back to the Lincoln.
You're almost painting the same picture.
But what's happening here with the Robinson for elementary is very similar, where all the core facilities are kind of placed down the middle of the school.
Yes.
So the media center, the art room, music rooms, et cetera, and what's around each of the areas is a commons area surrounded by classrooms. So again, whether it's a kindergarten suite or whether it's a 6th grade suite, they have sort of equal access to those pieces. That was a big piece of what they wanted to achieve. So it's items like that that might be appropriate for this school, might not be appropriate for the next school, but we want to figure out with you what are those priorities for your school.
Site adaptation for our area, pretty easy because it's a big rectangle. And so you don't have to worry about working around things. One of the big issues would be, though, is we hope for future case, if we were to put a middle school out there, we would want to make sure that we had like kitchen and a big gym centrally located so that eventually you'd be able to build off that side for co-use.
Absolutely.
And so now, when you're thinking about having that kind of plan with 2 different schools in there, how does with security, like DC West was fantastic because it divided stuff up and yet still kept it all together. How would you work around security on that? Are you considering them 2 totally separate schools?
I would ask you if you're considering them, because we have clients that believe strongly in commingling, and we have other clients that say, oh gosh, you can't put those younger kids with those older kids. And so to a large degree, that's going to be something that you would tell us. But, just as one example, the new high school that we're doing for Omaha Public Schools right now, it has a YMCA attached to it. And so maybe that's just an example of, we spent a lot of time talking about that so that you don't have a 14-year-old sophomore on a treadmill next to a 50-year-old man. how do you keep those people separate so that they're both getting the maximization of the space? You're able to, build one space that can be shared. And so a lot of that just boils down to discussion. And just, with electronics, you can do a lot where if you think of it as a kind of a Mason-Dixon line that separates one age group of students from another, that line doesn't always have to stay rigid. You can put in card readers that at different points of the day, the elementary kids have access to part of the building, that then you switch the card reader system, that then the middle school kids have access, if you want to separate them to that degree. So it's done at varying levels, and we see it done effectively with the people who really want to isolate and the people who really want to bring them together. So I think that's just a decision that you all would need to give us input on.
Another big picture item from a security standpoint is, looking at the site, one of the first things we do is, obviously schools are a big asset and amenity to the community. And just the placement of where those public spaces are they in the back so you don't see those people, or are they way in the front so it's very obvious where they're supposed to be and those visitors are going to be. And so just staging it so okay, this zone is meant for the public and this zone is meant for not public, starts to help establish some of those security safeguards, because it is a layered approach. I mean, Pat mentioned some of the finer details, but it's kind of a big picture look at it, and then you had to go down to the details and the hardware itself to make it actually work. And I think almost all the buildings that we do are pretty much dual use, if not tri-use. I don't even know if that's a term, but.
Yeah, we've done, one of the other schools that we did, it's an elementary school that's shared with a city library and the city parks and rec, all in one building, Saddlebrook, have you heard of it? So that's one where the hardest part of that is just getting the 3 owner entities to all agree on what they want. The part of it that we did was comparatively easy.
How do you feel about your ability to work with construction manager at risk and possibly owner's rep involvement?
We're very comfortable with all that. We've worked with a lot of owners reps. I know, I understand that one of the things that you're considering is working with Johnson Controls. We talked to them. They've asked us, frankly, that if they're involved, would we be willing to team with them? How might that work? And we said, by all means, we work with owners reps all the time. Construction manager at risk, I would be lying if I didn't say there's probably 8 or 9 really, really good construction management groups that you could be considering. We're very lucky in the Omaha Lincoln corridor to have a lot of quality people. And like I said, it's the way that it's going because it brings such value to the owner compared to the let's roll the dice and see who we get for a contractor based on who's low. I think it is going to speed up your project to do that. But we're very comfortable working as collaborators with those folks. We don't view it as us versus them. It's no different than all the different members of an ownership group. They're just another voice, another group of people that can help lead us to the better solution for you guys ultimately.
Anything else?
All right. Well, thank you for letting us come and talk to you. If you have follow-up questions, we'd love to share more examples or whatever you might have, but enjoyed spending time with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up is school calendar with Dr. Nielsen.
Okay, the calendars are being passed around.
Is there a option?
I know, the only one you're gonna have is option B, because we have looked at option A, B, C, D, E, F, G, maybe all the way through Z. We've looked at a lot. So this is the option where we have come down to, after we have taken feedback from multiple stakeholders, just kind of figuring out, okay, what do we want to look at as our calendar for next year? So a couple of the things that I want to go through as we talk about this calendar is the start of the year. The start of the year is always a place that we receive feedback from staff, students, families. And so it's one of those things that we look at the start of the year and we know it's very important. One of the concerns that we hear is we'd like to start later in August. Well, we could do that, but there's pieces that we have to look at if we do that. We would need to push first semester to end in January. That would have to happen. Or we would need to reduce breaks throughout the semester. So we'd need to take those days off. They would no longer be days off, they would be student days. We would need to reduce the number of instructional days. We have 177 instructional days, and I will tell you, Mr. Suter is going to talk about other pieces. We have a large number of instructional days. I mean, we are over instructional hours by a large amount. So we could reduce instructional days. That's an option too. Another option is we could be okay with 10 days difference between semesters, 10 plus days difference. So first semester could have 80, second semester could have 90. Okay, so we would just have to, if we looked at those things, if you looked at starting a week later, we'd have to be okay with some of these other pieces. So I will tell you, I'm not in favor of starting a week later because of those reasons. And so that's the thing is, we look at the feedback, but there's a rationale as to why we do what we do. So
If we did that, and you could reduce your instructional days, then would we have to reduce the contract days for staff also?
you could reduce contract days, you could make extra work days for staff, you could do different things. But the
Or do you do
contract,
that when they need extra work days?
the only thing is the contracted days is a negotiated item. So
Right.
the instructional days is kind of a board item that we talk about, board school item. The staff days would be a negotiated item, so we would have to take that to negotiations and
I know.
negotiate it with that.
I think that is a silly thing to talk about when, I mean, if our test scores suddenly rocket up and children don't no longer need instructional time, that makes sense, but I think at the current point, our children need that time, so I think that's not something we really need to spend a lot of time
But it's
talking
just an
about.
option, and that's why we wanted to put it out there, so that you have all the information on the table. And so that's why we will receive feedback every single year about the start of the year. I am going to say that is one thing I receive every single year from staff, from families. Well, we'd like to spend more summertime. We'd like another week to go on vacation. Okay, I understand that, but if we do that, know that there are ramifications if we do that. That's one of the reasons why I'm trying to put it out there, so that everyone knows.
How do the early out Wednesdays affect the calendar overall throughout the year? Like if we didn't have those, what would the calendar look like?
The same, the exact same, because you're looking at number of days, and since we have 177 days, we have to have 177 days, so the Wednesdays at this point do not affect. What we would end up doing is we would add more hours, so rather than, because right now, our high school has an additional 35.6 hours, our high school would probably be an additional 50, 60 hours, which that's quite a few days. And so those are some things that it would just end up making that time go even higher. So that's what that would happen if we looked at that Wednesdays. The other thing is, if we looked at those Wednesdays and we maybe did something different, we maybe look at more professional development days throughout the year. And so you maybe would do some different things. I don't know, we'd have to look at those pieces as well. And one of the pieces that we are looking at is scheduling in May, our time with Chad Dumas. Chad Dumas he's been giving our teachers a lot of professional development on leadership and executive leadership and how to lead PLCs in a very productive manner, so that we are seeing the results we want to see through the PLC process. And so it has been awesome. Our teachers have found great time to collaborate, great time to come together and start problem solving together. We actually have them coming in next week again. And when we had them come in October, I will tell you, the feedback from teachers was like, this was awesome. We actually got time to bring up an idea, but then start talking about it and maybe thinking differently about what we're doing, what approaches, even sharing the approaches that we're using. So we have seen some positives come out of this training, and we're very excited that the ESSER funding allowed us to spend money on bringing him in. So,
Would we see
yep.
much change if, because I know we've talked about switching PLC's days from Wednesdays, half days, to having a full day. I don't remember, we've talked about once a month instead of once a week. Does that change the days or hours or?
what it might change is the instructional days. Because what we would do is you would be adding more green to this calendar, and you'd be taking away instructional days for students. So that's what you would end up doing, is yes, it may equal the number of minutes, but the number of days would be taken away. So for example, in September, we'd add a green day there, so that would then reduce the instructional days, so we'd go down to 176 instructional days.
How many do we have to have instructional days? Is that a state, federal requirement or anything?
It's not a state or federal, the only thing that is a state requirement is the number of hours. We have to have 1080 for high school, and we have to have 1032 for middle school and or for middle school and elementary. So those are the number of instructional hours that we have to have, and we have to meet. So you can reduce days, but you still have the same number of, I mean, that's the thing, is it would just be reducing, kind of playing with what you have down at that bottom part.
Which would be better? Hopefully that came out as a question. As far as learning for kids, missing one full day or still keeping with the half days?
You know what, I think there's pros and cons to both. Because that's I don't know if there's a better way to do it. I think there's pros and cons. I think it really becomes what is our ultimate goal. The nice thing about that weekly piece is we are weekly looking at assessments, weekly looking at where our students are test scores, and spending time with our title teachers, with our special ed teachers, with even with our counselors, spending time touching base on where our kids are at this point in time. The one day would give us a lot more time to work on curriculum development and making sure that what we're teaching is aligned to our state standards, aligned to those pieces. So again, it's kind of where are we at and what do we need at this point in time? You know, if we could, when we create the single site elementary, one of the things that we noticed as we walked around DC West is there was a whole group of teachers during the middle of the day planning. So if we had a single site, could we look at plan time and then let that be the PLC time? I mean, PLC time is any time. It should be any minute during the day, just because we should be planning and collaborating with each other any minute of the day. But could we construct something that might give different timing? I mean, that we might be able to do that and look at those pieces too. So I think we have some flexibility more when you have a single site. So I think then looking at different priorities, but that's a great question, and it's one of those you look at and there's pros over here, cons over here, pros and cons.
Well, I know you've been working on it for over a year, studying
Absolutely.
specific things, so I just thought maybe other people would enjoy hearing.
Yeah.
Maybe not enjoy hearing,
Yeah.
but appreciate hearing what you've been doing. So.
Yep, and so that is one of the things that we are, it has been amazing, the transition we've had. Because like I said, 5 years ago, if I would have brought up part about, let's remove PLCs, it probably would have been, okay, go right ahead. But it is amazing how it has shifted over the last 1 to 2 years. You've just seen a shift of, no, we need it. We need it because there are more concerns that we have to be able to address. And we've got to be able to use that team concept to address it. And during the day, we may be putting out so many fires that I don't have time to go over and talk to you about what else is going on. What else do I need to know? So those are some things that I've seen a change. I've seen a lot more collaboration, a lot more, we need to figure out how to help and how to push forward. But I think we're also seeing a lot more of other things trickle into the schools that we've got to address as a team, and we can't address it by ourselves anymore.
Could that be partly due to younger teachers coming in and being more?
Younger, but I think also some social, I think mental health is another piece that, you know, we've got to work with our school counselors, we've got to work with the special ed teachers, with the title teachers, just kind of trying to figure out how do we work together so that the kids get what they need when they need it. Mhm.
Was there ever any options considered where you cut back on a little bit of Christmas break to, you know, potentially add on to the start?
Yep, we've talked to, I mean, we've looked at that one too, that you could take in like the 21st, 22nd even. I mean, you could take those 2 days and put them up there, put them up at the very top, but then you're starting on a Monday. So one of the things that I was going to,
And what is wrong with that?
okay, let me go through my,
Yeah,
I have it
no,
on
that's
my
fine.
list,
I'm just
because you're
curious.
right. So, first semester looks similar to this year, except we've pushed the winter break to the middle of the week. Helps us return in January because the first is on a Sunday. Additionally, the extra days in December will allow for us to complete testing, or whatever testing we need to take, we need to complete. One of the things with both semesters starting at the middle of the week, I will tell you our elementary teachers struggle with a 5-year-old coming and starting the very beginning of the year of kindergarten, sitting there for a whole week. So that is one of the things, when you talk to the K1, 2, they are going to be very adamant. These students need time to come in, get acclimated a little bit, get a few days under their belt, and then they need a break.
I think parents appreciate that time too, those weeks.
So that is one of the things that we have received feedback from, and I will tell you this is, now, I think we hear it probably middle school and high school too, that the
High
kids.
school, I mean, I'll speak for that. I mean, if you start on a Wednesday, you get kind of an idea of who, your makeup of your class, what's gonna happen, they can dash to the guidance office and get their schedule changed and stuff. But then on that Monday, you can really start, I don't know, and it's hard to explain why but it is awkward to start on a Monday. I think there's a lot of problems.
And it makes the week very long for kids, especially coming off like the summer, where I've maybe not had a schedule at all. And now you're putting me into this routine where I'm now waking up at 6:37, when I was maybe waking up at 9:30. And now you're asking my brain to function this early in the morning. So there is rationale behind that start date. And a lot of it is that feedback from the staff onto, when we have started on Tuesdays, by that Friday, the kids are just exhausted. And so that's one of the things we've kind of tried to push that back and adjust. You know, I know that that is something we could look at doing just to start that second week. But I will tell you, our teachers would struggle, and by that Thursday, Friday, there may not be as much learning as you want to have happen as what would happen that following Thursday and Friday. Just because getting the kids in, kind of getting them used to a structure, giving them a little break, and then bringing them back for a full week tends to work much better when we're looking at the minds of youth. So that would be the rationale for that part. One of the things that we did also do in March, we added 3 days, and we did move this. Normally, we have had that 15th, 16th, 17th, or that time off on the week of state boys basketball. Usually, granted, this year, state basketball is one whole week, so it's different. But what we did was, if we push it back, that makes third quarter and fourth quarter different by a half a day. If you also look at our quarters, first quarter's 43.5 days, second quarter's 43 days, third quarter's 46 days, fourth quarter's 46.5 days. That's awesome. And we have quarter classes at the middle school and high school. And when you're talking high school credit, if I have such a discrepancy between my quarter classes and I get one more unit in here versus one less unit here, that's a problem. Because those are standards that those kids are not meeting in that previous quarter. So that's why we like to keep our semesters even and our quarters even, because it helps across the board make sure that we're teaching what we should be teaching. Yeah. Okay, the other thing that we have taken feedback from is if you look at May, what we've done, and by adding that third day in March, we've pushed the last day to that Thursday. That Thursday's a half day. Now realize there's 2 snow days built in. So if we don't use snow days, which is highly unlikely, but if we don't use them, that means we would get out on that Tuesday with a half day. If we didn't take that extra day, I mean, we could cut off extra days here and there. We could get out on the 19th. But the other thing that does is that then can push us to having graduation on the 21st, which is not Mother's Day. And I will tell you, mothers love to see their kids graduate, but they also love to have that day without a graduation party or without planning for that. So that is one thing that this year we are able to do is we moved graduation to that third week, and we've received quite a bit of positive feedback. So when we put this out there, there were some mothers that responded and said, I thought you were moving graduation. Well, it depends. Depends upon how many Sundays we have in May. But if we're able to push it back, we are then able to, seniors' last day could be the 16th, and they would still have plenty of hours. Or we could look and say seniors' last day is the 18th. You know, that's one thing that I would work with Mr. Suter on, very closely to looking at that. If we said seniors' last day is the 16th, the nice thing about that, currently seniors' last day is usually a Thursday, but if you push it to that Tuesday, the counselors and the administration would have plenty of time to make sure all plans were finalized and credits were where they needed to be, and we were ready to go for graduation. So, yes. I think I've talked about kind of the rationale behind this calendar. What other questions do you have?
I think the 24th of May for PLC could be eliminated.
Well, we can do that.
I just don't.
I don't know about everybody else, but when I know the next day is the last day of
This is the
school,
half day.
I'm not gonna
Yeah.
collaborate and be all that serious about it. It'd be more like, okay, we done, oh, let's go back and pack that room up.
Yep.
I mean, I think you have to be realistic about that.
One thing we did last year was with the entire staff, and we have the Meet Your Cousins PLC in November. We use that for the recognition of all of our retirees, so that would be probably what that PLC would be used for.
But we could, you know, the other thing is, we like to make all Wednesdays yellow because parents then know. I mean, it isn't, they won't show up on the 24th at 1:30 saying, where's my child? So that, I mean, that's the thing, is
Right.
it's kind of a consistency. Now, hopefully, we don't have any snow days, and we won't even have to worry about the 24th.
We will not have snow this year.
I know,
But
but wait, it's, yeah, we hope. We'd see some snow. I don't
We
think
need
so.
some.
I hope
But how would that work
Yeah.
then,
We need
if,
snow.
when is graduation on this calendar?
On the 21st. So then all students would get out either the 23rd or the 25th. So if you count the number of days,
But then if we're moving it back to, with all these no snow days, then what are we talking about?
the 23rd is a half day.
Okay.
So if you count the numbers of days, if you go in there and count, you're gonna see instructional days for students is 179 and staff days is 188. Those 2 extra snow days are in there. So then what we would do is just take them off if we don't use them. So that's where we would get out the 23rd. That's kind of been our practice. We haven't added. We've rather kept them on there just so that parents know that the last day, I mean, they assume the last day is the 25th, and I will tell you, most years, we have gone to that, we've used those snow days. So we've just gone to that day. Okay, any questions about the calendar? Okay, so we will ask for approval in December. Unless you have any other questions, concerns, or anything come up, please let me know, because we can push this back to January too. That's not a problem, so.
So the only way to potentially start the 18th would be to get rid of the 21st, 22nd, 23rd of December, right? Because that would,
You would then start the 16th. Because you would only get rid of 3 days, so you would push the start of school back to that 16th. But then you'd also have to you could get rid of the day before Thanksgiving. You could get rid of, we could get rid of the 14th. Now, I will tell you, breaks are nice. And not only do teachers, but our kids need breaks. Our kids cannot continue to go full bore all the way through. Their minds need breaks.
You need to talk to some women about pushing Christmas, let's get out on the 23rd. This is a production that mothers put on, and they need time to plan.
I just don't think,
What day was this year's first day?
the 11th or 12th.
So
Well-
we're looking at about the same.
Yeah, or the 12th, because it was one day difference, yes. The one thing that kindergartners are expected to read. Their minds need breaks. We cannot continue to push without giving their brains a chance to just rest and go home and play outside and do whatever they need to do just to decompress. So,
Now, you can go past easily, give them equal, and go into January. Teachers do not, most teachers do not like that. I liked it fine, I didn't think it was a big deal, but most teachers want to give those finals before Christmas.
yeah, semester finals
That,
for high
it was a big
schoolers.
deal when they went to that, yeah.
I mean, I'd rather give high schoolers a break too,
Mhm.
because the other thing, they need a break, their mind needs a break too. It's nice to have it done so that they aren't thinking about anything over that winter break. Yes. There's a lot of fun things we could do. Well, we could go year-round if we really wanted to. That'd be more. Not going there, okay, I'm done.
We could go just 4 days
Yeah,
all year.
we could go 4 days all year. Yep. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
and it's been done.
Yes.
Next up is Mr. Alexander for policy article update. Yay.
It is actually Mr. Suter, so I'm gonna, on his way up here, but I'm gonna kind of give you a briefing of why Mr. Suter is here. In our continuing policy review, we're coming up on probably the most involved set of policies, which is Article 5. Article 5 is the article that deals more with students, curriculum, instruction, and learning requirements that are in existence here at BPS. Now, Article 5 is not in front of you tonight. You have 3, 6, and 9, I think, or 3, 8, 9. But in preparation for Article 5, we need to have some lead-in discussion on a few specific policies that you as a Board of Education are in charge of making the decision on. And you're going to make that decision on the basis of the recommendation from the professionals in that category. So there are a couple of specific policies that we're going to need you to have discussion on. And we want to start that discussion on specifically one of those policies tonight that revolves around graduation requirements, which is where Mr. Suter comes into play, and has been studying and researching some different things that he would like to share with you in terms of creating some more clarity and specificity around graduation requirements.
Great, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to speak to you. Jason's right. One of the things that we talked about when Jackie invited me down about 3 or 4 weeks ago was the graduation requirement of communications. Okay, communications at the high school right now, all students have to take either one of 2 classes that are offered. They have to take either journalism as a required class, or they have to take intro to theater. And by doing that, if they pass that class, they earn 5 credits and they meet the communications requirement. Okay? The last several years, I've been asked more than I have during my 19 years as principal, why is that? why is it those two classes are the only two that count for communication? There are things that our kids are doing nowadays in school that would seem like they are communicating through various ways than either by writing articles for a newspaper or journalism, or standing in front of a group of people and giving a play or performing a play. Such things as our audio-visual media class that we've started with the Bean. We've got students, folks, that are giving play-by-play commentary on volleyball, basketball games. People have said, why is that not a communication requirement? Those kids are communicating with our whole community and who knows who all with the audio-visual part. Been asked before, why is a student who stands in front of our students or 900 people at a musical and performs a solo or solos for 900 people at a musical, why is that not considered communication? So it's tied in some of the music and some of the things that our kids do in performance. So my initial question to Jackie and Jason was, what does the board want for a communications requirement? I went back after that meeting with them and asked some of the people in our school, some of our counselors, some of our teachers, my historian, Mrs. Morris, who's been there for 50 years, where did this start? Mrs. Morris told me it's been in place since before she started working at Beatrice High. So it's a 50-year-old policy that's set on 2 classes that I think things that, okay, well then Doris can help us understand better. But from what I was approaching this meeting with is it's an older policy that has identified a few classes that kids need to take to fulfill a graduation requirement. And I think things have changed over that 50 years as to what could possibly, with your permission or with your approval, what could actually meet that communication requirement. So that's the question I'm here tonight with. I'd like to go quick. I know you're tired, but I also think it's an important aspect that Jason said as to what do you want our communications requirement for our high school kids to be, because they will not graduate unless they meet that, the way the board policy is now.
So is speech not one of,
It has historically was an option, it was always an option.
Well, it would be if we get kids to sign up for it.
but
We
maybe
would-
they
we
would
would-
sign up for it if it met part of that
Is there
requirement.
a
It
speech
always
class,
did
or
meet
is
the
it just-
It did
requirement.
meet the requirement, they just
Yeah.
aren't signing up for
They're
that
not
class.
signing up for
So,
it.
It's-
so the 3 choices are intro to theater, journalism, or speech.
Yes.
But
We
the
can,
2 are
we would
not.
offer speech as
Yes.
a class, but we typically get 2, 3, 4 kids to sign
Sign
up
up
for
for
it.
it, yeah, so you don't get
So
enough
is
kids
that
that you could
has
offer a
group?
class.
The idea behind the class was that kids learn to communicate either orally or written, or so.
I mean, as an employer in the community, I struggle with having theater or music as a communications requirement, because we have kids who can't even write an email or answer a phone. Like, the communication is difficult for kids. We really struggle with 25 and under in our hires, and we only employ a few people. So I know it's a problem throughout the community, but I mean, I would much rather have just speech as a requirement. But I
Well-
think journalism is good. But anyway, I want to see our kids
Right.
be able to actually speak and write, and not just sing a song in front of people.
Right. And we can say that all kids have to take a speech class, but then I've got to have a speech teacher.
Sure.
I've got to have a teacher that can teach that all day long to all the kids that are going to take it. And right
Right.
now, we don't have a speech teacher, and our journalism teacher splits with English, teaching English classes and journalism. Our intro to theater teacher also teaches English, so I don't have a dedicated teacher that would be able to take that load on at this time.
And I think the ideal had always been to do 6 weeks of journalism, 6 weeks of public speaking, 6 weeks of theater, so they were exposed to all of those. But that takes a lot of people and a lot of scheduling, and it just never really worked.
So, as Jason mentioned, I guess I came prepared to this meeting that if you wanted some ideas or an idea of what it could look like and what we've looked into what other schools are doing, I'm handing that out to you now, and I'd like to go over that with you. But ultimately, as he said, it's gonna come down to what you as a school board would want that communications requirement to look like. So what you have in front of you, when I went back and looked at the elective courses that we offer our kids, I think they fall really nicely into three main categories. We've got communications courses, where they're either writing, speaking, singing, expressing themselves through art, expressing themselves through speech as a class, audio-visual, or world language. And those would all be those courses under communication. I think we offer electives to our students that fit under career and technical ed, family consumer science, welding, woods, autos, business, work-based learning, CENCAP, personal finance, career readiness, and industrial technology courses. And then the other elective courses that we offer fit nicely under physical education, aerobics, you can see those, including health. So, in the bolded print, the core classes that are required are, for graduation, are 40 credits in English, which is all 4 years, 30 credits in math, 30 to 35 credits in social studies, and science is 30. So there's 135 of the 260 credits that we require kids to earn that are coming out of the core curriculum. So over half. The other amount comes to the kids through electives, and they, as I said, they can be broken down nicely, I feel, and counselors and people that have had a look at this and teachers into these categories. Now, you may say, well, how do our kids do now? How many credits are they earning? So if you look at the communications classes, when I had Mrs. Morris actually, we pulled 14 random seniors transcripts from last year and went through those and looked, and an average number of credits in the communication area is 58 credits. Those 14 kids, which represent 140 graduates, earned 58 credits in communication. The low number of credits was 20, okay? The highest number of credits earned was 140, and then I had 2 kids out of that 14 that had that 140. These are kids that are gonna come in and take almost all of the courses they can in music, in world language, in theater, in art, those types of classes, those communication classes. Then in the career and technical ed, I went through and averaged those 14 same kids. They earned an average credits of 43 in the career and technical ed area. The lowest number of earned was 5. Okay, we had one young lady that only did 1 class in career and technical ed, but she's one of those 140 in communications. And then the high number of credits earned was 85 in career and technical ed. And then the last was physical education. The average number of those 14 kids we looked at was 28 in PE, and the high number of 15, which is health, and 2 more semesters of PE, which is required. And then the highest number were 40 credits in PE, which are kids that are going to take probably advanced conditioning every single year that they're in high school. They're athletes. So what I'm getting at is that what I would say would be a way that we could look at it, which some other schools that we've looked at is we could say students would be required to graduate from Beatrice High School earning anywhere from 10 to 15 credits in communications, 10 to 15 credits in career and technical ed, and 15 credits in PE. I initially started thinking 10, but I'll be honest, when I looked at the averages of that group of kids that graduated last year, I don't think we'd be causing kids a hardship if we said you need 15 in those 3 areas across the board. Now, it's going to take the numbers of journalism down because now kids would have more options to take besides journalism and intro to theater. Okay, they'd have yearbook they could take for the communications requirement. They'd have art, music classes, speech, audio, so forth. Okay, we don't have anything in place right now that requires kids to take any career and technical ed, which I think would be a good addition to require for our students to take some classes in that. We talk about it all the time, and we hope they take those classes, and we offer them, but there's no set requirement on what they take. There is a requirement on physical education, so that would remain the same. So that's an idea, and the schools that we looked at are listed there below. Another interesting thing that I wanted to bring to you tonight, it's a whole nother topic I feel, but it's also kind of connected, because the schools that we looked at that are doing segments of requirements like this are Norris, Plattsmouth, Ralston, Seward, Wahoo, Waverly, York, and us. Those are all of our schools in our new conference, plus Norris and Waverly. And you can see the number of required credits that those schools require for graduation. We're at 260. We are high. The next closest to us is Waverly, Wahoo is at 250. And Waverly is at 220 now, going to 240 in 2024-25. So.
Why is that such a large discrepancy between requirements? Is that just a board decision, or is that?
Yeah, we
Depends on
have,
how many periods there are in the day, makes a difference.
makes a difference to some degree. Yeah, it was done several years ago. We added more requirements for math and science. And at that time, we jumped from 240 to 260.
Wasn't that done with Dr. Lopez? Because that was done right before I came, was when that switch was made from 240 to 260.
I can tell you, to be honest with you, I asked Mrs. Morris, when did that happen? And I don't remember much, I don't remember me having much input on that. It was just something that this is what we're gonna do. So I'm not deferring that. I'm the principal, I'll take ownership of that, but I don't remember having a lot of conversations on why that increase happened, just that it was about half. If we're gonna maybe require more core classes, it was about, doubling that would be about half of what the core class requirement was.
I do like the idea of having everyone take a certain amount of credits in each section, because I think that diversity is important. So I do like that. And did I miss it, that we don't have speech right now, but we have speech as,
It's
When
listed.
When our kid,
It's
we
listed.
list speech as an offering when we register kids every year. But if we have kids that don't sign up for a class, I don't have teacher time to say, we're gonna
Right.
teach it to 3 kids.
so.
So for
if-
many, many years, speech has been a class that we'll teach, but nobody signs up for it, or very few kids do,
Right.
so we drop it.
So how many kids would have to sign up for it for you to say, we need to teach speech?
Well, I could teach one section, I don't have a magic number, but it's usually around 6 or 7.
Oh, okay, because
And then
Ed
a lot of it-
Ingram does a speech club.
Right, and I think we need to be careful about offering credits to activities or clubs.
Right, but,
But he has limited number this year.
Yeah.
yeah, and I guess that was my question.
Yeah.
So somebody is kind of teaching speech.
Emily Brummond and Ed Ankrum are our speech coaches.
Okay.
When any kids sign up for speech as an activity, they're the ones who take them to those speech meets.
And I would agree, because otherwise you consider and say physical education, why can't basketball be?
Yeah. Now, Emily Brummond, one of our English teachers, would love to teach speech.
Mhm.
And she's asked me again, how can we push this to get kids taking speech?
Well, and I guess to me that's really important, because kids are on their devices all the time communicating, not verbally, but they're still communicating, but it's not verbal.
Speech is terrifying. I was so scared of speech in high school and college especially, but it was the best experience I had, because I wouldn't be able to talk in front of people today if I hadn't had that experience. I've been forced into that, and I think because this generation has grown up completely on these, I didn't have these in high school, but this generation is so used to communicating in written form. I don't think that's an issue, but I think being able to speak is,
Written like with
well, it's
correct
terrible, but at
spelling
least
and
they
or
can.
complete sentences might be a bit
Then
of
no
an
one
issue.
else
Smiley
are on the
faces.
teacher.
And
But
again,
they
they're
can't-
used to
It's a form.
texting, and it's
Yes.
abbreviated communication.
And that's a problem when you're,
Yes.
when you're talking about employers. I mean, I don't know how many employers I've talked to who've said that employees will text them to call into work, or they don't even call in at all, but, you know, to be able to pick up a phone and have a conversation, that's scary for kids sometimes, which is ridiculous.
I think it's
So-
important to note that I believe, and obviously I care about this issue, but that communication was meant to communicate with a large audience, like
through the spoken word or through the written word.
Mhm.
And I would have to say, I would disagree with singing a song. I just, I'm
That's
sorry,
totally
but that's not I get that they are, and art maybe is the same way. I just think it's, in our society, we need the spoken and written word and the impact of that on people. I mean, all of us can witness lately what has happened because people have gotten a hold of social media and written and spoken, and that can have a huge impact, and I think that's important that there be a place in the curriculum where students understand that impact.
And I think if the board would come out with some type of statement that this is what this communications requirement is, that would help, because I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm getting people saying, well, why is singing in front of 900 students or 900 people in the have-along for all of the kids that are the leads in the musical, why is that not? And I can't explain. Well, I don't think that's what the board had in mind when they set up the communications requirement.
I will be happy to come visit with those people, because I believe that it's a public audience, and the impact of the written and spoken word is something that all of us, not all of us are gifted with a beautiful voice that can stand and sing, but all of us should be, we are told, can develop the skill to read, write, and speak. I mean, we spend much of the curriculum is dedicated to developing those skills, and the communication requirement was put into place to fine-tune those for large audiences.
I think there's a big difference too between singing someone else's
Yes.
words that are not your own.
So what do you think about
writing a
audio-visual?
speech.
Because that's another question.
Well,
I
think-
do
ask
like,
all the
I
time.
think that one is completely relevant.
I think
for
that and
today's world.
journalism in this day and age
Absolutely.
is interchangeable.
What about world language? I get asked that one too. If I can speak in Spanish,
No.
why can I not?
That's for
Spain
like
struggles
John and I to
speaking English.
speak, not for,
But I think people say, well, that's communicating.
but it's communicating with a large audience was
what
the
you-
reason for it. I mean, I
So what you
came when
need
it
from us is a
came into
definition?
effect because I'm so damn old. I mean,
So you need, are you saying you need a definition of what communications is from the board, or do we have that already, or?
There's
No,
no
we
thing,
don't
there's no
have it.
definition. It's just
So
that
we
these
can-
two classes meet the requirement, or
Okay,
in this
That's
case,
all it
3
is.
classes.
I got
So-
because it started, the original course when I came was called a mass media course that we taught to kids.
So,
I think
in, s-
communi-
in speech, are you making up what you're saying?
Right, you write
You
the
should be.
speech.
You do write the speech, it is not just copying.
usually.
That's my
there's-
difficulty
Usually
with,
there's topics, right, or
Right,
yeah.
things
Yeah,
that you
anytime I
choose
ever
to-
took speech, it was, you know, it's either, you know,
It's like English, only
Yeah.
spoken, or, you know, English. class.
Persuasive.
So it's
or
not
Yeah.
like doing
information.
Shakespeare.
no.
no, it's
No.
to a big audience, like mass communications, not.
Folks, I would say if you wanted to say a speech class, we're gonna have to have some options, because we have so many kids that, because of anxiety or whatever, will not do a speech in front of their classmates. I'm just being honest with you.
But
So-
does
We
that
have
help
other
them?
options here, if we
But-
give them other
Yeah.
Well,
options.
it
Right.
depends on what options you say meet that criteria.
Right.
You know,
I
and
did
I-
in high school, but I had I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
I
Go
had
ahead.
a horrible time speaking in front of people once.
What did you write?
Yes, I loved to write.
So that's the option we have, it's
Oh, I'd have
journalism,
done that,
speech,
but we
or
were
public.
required to take speech.
But it's developing those skills.
Mhm.
How about
It's
you?
not writing a story about yourself, it's writing for others.
So how many classes is 10 credits one class, or is that 5?
No, 5,
Five.
so it'd be 3 classes.
Hey Jackie, what were you gonna say?
Well, I was going to say, also, is not art an expression of language?
No.
Because here is the thing, I know, but if I put on an art show, I am, and that's the thing, is it's a way to communicate.
But
The
that's not
picture,
the
visual.
point, the
I
communication
know, but
credit
what
was
I'm
for
saying is.
a large audience,
So then,
I
I think we need to change, it's not communication, because there's so many different ways to communicate. I think it's, we want you to master the skill of reading and writing, or speaking and writing, and that's what it is.
for
Because-
large audiences, it's different when you write an article for general population as opposed to writing an article like, I had to write an exegesis and it was written for one person. It wasn't written for everybody here to read and understand. That's a skill.
So,
That's a different
Absolutely.
skill set.
Yeah,
So
I
then
think- I think
would you
if
have
you-
an expectation that the journalism class actually produces a newspaper? Because we have not done that for years.
Well, they can also, I mean, they can, the computer is there. I mean, they can have published articles there pretty darn easily.
But for a first-year journalism student, I think it should be a newspaper class if we're gonna have it. A first-year student in a journalism class can probably not produce at the level, especially if it's just a semester. I think it should be an all-year.
We
I
did
guess
it.
my goal with communication is that students are ready for what comes next after high school. I want them to be prepared for the workforce. I want them to be prepared to go to a 2-year or a 4-year college if that's what they choose, but I think some of these are a little out there for me as far as communication goes and how I define communication. I think
Well,
they
we
can all
could,
be.
another thing we could look at is if the board would give me direction on what communications classes would meet what you want for that requirement. The ones that don't, I could also create a fine arts category and list those and have
That would
requirement
make
to
a
take
lot more
fine
sense
arts.
to me. Yeah.
do you, I'm just kicking out an idea here. Do you, instead of titling it communication, title it speaking and writing? Then that, no? Okay.
It's communicating with it started with mass communication. I know I feel solid, I feel this is an important, I felt pleased when I came to Beatrice Public Schools and they thought that was important. It's different, like when you're asked to write a paper in English and you're supposed to take a character in a novel, develop them, analyze them, all of that, that's writing for the teacher. All of you have had to write a paper for a teacher. But in journalism and speech, the goal was to communicate for a large audience. You know, and you talk about,
So I get your point. So how do you title that
right,
to represent what it is you want?
what mass communication.
I have just some check marks next to some of these. Would yearbook meet your definition?
Well, don't they have to take journalism before they take yearbook?
Yeah.
So why would it, oh, I see, it's
What
the,
you're-
if
what
you're
you're
gonna ask for 10
extend it, if you're gonna
credits,
ask
yeah,
for 10 or 15 credits.
okay.
So yearbook would count, journalism would count, intro to theater would count, no to art and music, speech would count, and audio visual media production would count, and no to language, world language.
Mhm.
What is world language?
Spanish.
It used to be French and
And
German.
German and
That's
Spanish.
just learning.
And we have we've offered Chinese
It is.
distance learning.
That's-
Ultimately, the strategic plan talks about developing experience within our curriculum that enhance our student learning. And I think we're just trying to get a handle on what it is that would meet your expectations on communication, because I'm getting asked that question more and more from different classes we've developed, or different people thinking that our kids are communicating in different ways, but there's never been a definition, at least for a while, that says what
I will be
what it's
more than
supposed
happy
be.
to come up there and share with
Well, and I think
them.
there's a lot of other, even within the core classes, that there's communication going on as well. You know, so it's
Well,
it's not necessarily developing a story for a mass group, but it's presenting a project, it's,
And with our kids being one-to-one, they're doing everything through email and Google Classroom, they're communicating all the time through computers.
you know, they're presenting projects, they're presenting, I mean,
I will have questions from people in the music area as to why singing and performing at the musical and those kind of things is not communicating. I'm just telling you, I'll get asked that a lot,
I just don't.
Someone else's work, that would be my basic.
so.
I like the idea of fine arts though, if you had a separate category for some of those to go into, I don't know how
But
that
not
would.
if it's a have to. I mean, I think
Well,
that's
even in intro
kind
to
of,
theater, are they developing their own?
mm-mm.
So So I mean, that would fall under the same thing Aaron's talking about. That's where I would say that's a little questionable as well.
Mhm.
Because
Yeah,
again,
'cause
if you're
for
just
theater, they would
memorizing
be-
lines and
Yep.
True.
regurgitating what somebody else has written,
Mhm.
Let me go back and take the courses that tonight you said you think would be that requirement, and then create maybe a fine arts column. When are you wanting to get this approved or have it?
I mean, the other thing too is, of course, I'm sure some of the core teachers would kill me for saying this, but it's integrating some sort of communication within each core class. You know, and does
Sure.
that then more cover what we're doing? And that's probably more real world. You know, if you're in a business class, for example, you could be, you know, presenting a business plan, and that's gonna be a real world.
And entrepreneurship
Even when you're
class.
looking at some of the career technical ed classes, you know, if you're in, you know, welding, it's talking through how you know, did that task, maybe to the class or to a small group or something like that. Because, you know, I think with a lot of the other, for example, the reading and writing, I know even in band, they have to do some writing, you know, within that. So it's more, can you just incorporate that into the core classes? That probably is gonna get you better than saying specifically, you have to take one of these classes to meet that requirement.
But that won't happen.
Well, I mean, but
Well,
the
classes,
majority of it is happening.
I didn't list any of we've offered a creative writing class through our English department for,
And especially with the block scheduling, that
yeah,
even
so.
gives you more time to. I mean, you can even do it with math, science. I mean, those are easy ones that, again, I think you could probably go to about every classroom and you're seeing that happen anyway. Because this is a board policy that we're saying we have to have 10 to 15 credits, right? It's not,
No,
there's
the
no,
board policy says 5 credits for communication. That's the
One class.
one
but that's
class.
not a state requirement though, or anything
No.
like that.
No, it's the board requirement, so the only reason I put 10 to 15 on here is if we were gonna keep these
Right.
groupings, if you're gonna offer more choices, then I think the number of credits should go up. And going through those average of what the kids earned in that last year's senior class, I feel very comfortable it could be anywhere from 10 and probably closer to 15 is what we should do, but.
Well, and you know, most that are going into college have to take a language.
Mhm.
It's just a
Absolutely.
requirement. Now, obviously not everybody's going in that direction, but that's,
Mhm. Well, and I like the idea of the CTE, because I think that is huge. We have students that don't take any CTE courses, and they should be. I think that is a huge piece of, you know, but for state requirements, for Rule 10, the only thing we have to offer are the English, math, social studies, science, and then the physical education. Those are required. The rest are, I mean, we have to have so many electives, so the rest are electives, and that's just the added bonus. But then the policy then governs what kids have to take to meet graduation requirements. So those are the pieces that we have to, that as we're looking at this, we can keep it the same as is. But, you know, you'll still get those questions that will come up, and I think that they are valid questions to at least talk about.
you know,
and to
even when I
think
took
about.
an intro to business class in high school, it was, to Aaron's point, how do you write a letter? How do you address an envelope? I mean,
Yeah.
Oh
that
gosh,
was part
that's a
of,
struggle too.
but then that, you know, that, I think that, again, that all folds into that whole communication thing that's probably already going on in almost everything on this page, versus requiring somebody to have to take journalism, or, sorry, Doris, or theater, or.
You don't have to be sorry, but look at what's happened in society today with the debates and the divisions which exist. And that's the point of a journalism course, is to talk about that and to understand how the language you use can make that worse or make that better.
Influence or-
Specifically in a democracy, you want to have that free expression. So that's, I think, the difference. It's issues that you're going to talk about, whereas I agree, like when you make a presentation, you make it for a large group, but it's not the same as, if we want our children to lead appreciating a democracy and that First Amendment right, that's where you pick that up. You don't pick that up when you explain to somebody how a gadget works. You pick that up when you talk about real issues that are going on.
So, do you understand it more, do you put it more as understanding how to communicate?
To a large group, yes, absolutely, to make your.
That's how you're breaking it down, understanding how to communicate, because like sign language, you're actually learning how to communicate, but would that be the same?
No, it's
Because you're
that.
not understanding how to communicate, you're just learning how to communicate with somebody.
Right, and it's
Am I-
more
Am I
the,
breaking it down
the
correctly?
content of, how do you make yourself clear to a large audience about a particular topic of interest in the world today? I mean, we have, amazingly enough, not everything can be learned on TikTok. And so that's the point of it, and it's to help the kids explore the differences between all those ways of communicating. And some of them are far better than others, I mean, it's far better to listen to a game on TV or on the radio. I mean, you might want to read about it in the paper, and lots of people do, but a lot of people also like to listen. So how are those the same and how are they different? And what's that message that you want to get across? What's the best way to get that message to people and help them understand that?
Jason,
Now-
what was real quick? What was the strategic plan piece again?
It's a 4-3, number 4, strategy 4, number 3, number 3. This talks about developing experiences within the curriculum that provide enrichment for all students. It's kind of a stretch, but I think that's what we're doing here. We're trying to set up a pathway. Because if we were to implement something like this, this would be on a sheet like this, and when kids signed up for classes, it'd be a pathway that they would take and have to take. So we would be enhancing their educational experience.
I do like the idea of doing communication and fine arts, because that maybe will address the music and, and I would put theater under that particular one, that would be a fine arts, but that maybe addresses that question that you were asked on a regular basis.
Well, because a lot of them are gonna say, we are communicating with somebody. Look at Celine Dion or something else. They write their songs and they're communicating with us. But these kids aren't writing the music and communicating their own self, so I can understand why you don't feel
Some of
that.
them
That question is only asked because kids don't want to take time out
Bingo.
to take that class. They want to be in. I mean, and the reverse is true too. I had kids that didn't want to take time out from journalism to go take a PE class. So that's where, I just think we need to be honest about that.
Well, yeah, it does cause some scheduling conflicts, especially for the kids that are, I offered to create a fine arts column, but I'm gonna tell you, there's gonna be kids that have no interest in vocal, instrumental, art, or world language. So are we gonna say they have to earn credits in those areas, and there will be some kids that'll struggle with that.
And their argument will be that taken away, I want to do welding, I know I'm gonna do welding. And so I think that's something that we need to consider when we're taking from one pot, or when we're adding to one, we're taking from somewhere else, because if we're not adding hours
We're making it too
or credit requirements.
Let me go back to work, and kind of put something together, and then can I present again in next year?
Yeah.
Yes.
In January.
December meeting.
I think, so, we're not gonna get into it tonight, but I think there's a time also where you as a Board of Education have to look at your graduation requirements, because what we've done right now is we've extended a limb on the tree. And one of those branches that we're talking about is these requirements, but the other limb on the branch is the total number of requirements you have there and the positives and negatives to that. I think you really honestly need to have a discussion about that, because that requirement, although we may see it in our minds as being 260 credit hours, is a great thing to challenge our students, which it is. There are also some other sides of that that you need to understand. We don't need to go into that tonight, but at some point, I think you need to have that conversation. So, Mr. Suter?
It sounds like what I heard is our physical education requirements are pretty solid. You agree with those? You like the idea of adding some career and technical ed requirements? Anywhere from 10 to 15 hours of classes they would take in that area. But it's the communication and the fine arts thing that you want some more. I'll come up with something maybe. I'm a little concerned about the fine arts part, because I know we'll have kids that will have no interest in music and art and world language.
Well, and you could, like I just said, we could be too defined,
Yeah,
and
so-
then it isn't.
So maybe it's just, I'll look at it and come back, but thank you for your time.
Mr. Suter, thank you for your research and work here. That's a great example of conversation that needs to happen, so thanks. You're welcome. All right. We're just moments away from being done with this meeting. Are we ready to move on? Okay.
We'll
I'm just
move
gonna-
on to, I guess, Article 3. Is that what I mean?
Yes, so as I mentioned, Article 5 is out there. It's the one that's going to take us the most as an administrative group to work our way through to have prepared for you. It's probably going to involve more discussions like this. We have 3 different policy sections for you to review between now and the January Committee of the Whole meeting. So we purposely, we're kind of loading you up tonight to have plenty of reading material over Christmas vacation. But the idea is that these 3 policy sections probably don't have as much need for as much discussion. Now, there are still, you might find policies in here that you'd like to bring to the forefront, but for tonight's purposes, I just want to walk you through these sections and give them to you, and then we'll have another discussion about them at the January Committee of the Whole meeting. These won't be approved in December or January, so we have a whole stretch here of time for you to review them. The chart with each set of policies, so let's just start with the 3000s, is the comparison chart and highlights the policies where text or content is carried over from the current BPS policies to the new proposed policies. So anything that's highlighted in yellow means that includes into the Perry policy something from the old BPS policies. So we've tried to carry that over. For simple instruction, anything highlighted in yellow in the current BPS policy that we have incorporated into the policies, Perry policies, or where we've made minor grammatical or proposed changes that enhance the purpose of the policy. So yellow is a key thing for you, okay, obviously. There are parts of the Beatrice school policies that are woven into those statutorily required legal parameters of the policy. In other words, legal counsel is going to give us what's statutorily required, but then we take our Beatrice policies that we have and weave those into those, making sure that they're legally ready for you to go. So, the 3,000 policies, this article, primarily reflect budgetary and fiscally related operations of the district. Excuse me, and outline key aspects of fund setup and management operation, expenditure and revenue procedures, insurance and inventory requirements, and all the things related to that. So that's what the 3,000 policies are going to entail, okay? The 8,000 policy section, these policies are internal board policies that deal specifically with items related to you as a Board of Education. So key areas of note include organization of the Board of Education, role of the board members of the Board of Education, methods of operation of the Board of Education. So the 8,000 policy section is really geared around you specifically as a board, what's statutorily required, and then also what Beatrice has done in the past. The 9,000 policies are bylaws of the board and are policies specifically related to the operations of the board. So the 8,000s are kind of structure, 9,000 are kind of operations. Some key ones in there are line of authority and authority of the Board of Education. What your authority is as a Board of Education as compared to you as an independent board member. The length of terms of service and officer roles on the Board of Education. Bylaws, policies, and regulations of the board, and finally, the types of meetings that the board may operate with, different types of meetings. So specifically, special meetings, COW meetings, closed session, open session, those types of things. So those are how those are broken out, and I don't think it's important for us to go through them policy by policy, because predominantly, everything in here is already legally prepared with the previous Beatrice policies woven in, ready for you to review. And what we'll do is get the highlights tonight, send them home with you, read them. If you have questions, there's things you'd like to discuss, please feel free to send those our way. We'll pick these back up again at the January Committee of the Whole meeting. And we'll review them one more time with the intent to approve them at the February Committee of the Whole meeting. Now, with all that said, as you saw tonight with Mr. Suter's presentation on Article 5, that's really an important section that deals with a lot of the instruction curriculum and teaching and learning around kids. So that policy that article set of policies we've held off to the end because it's going to take more time and discussion than maybe these will. So I hope that helps explain. That's all I got.
Well, I'm guessing even though it is the proper time for public questions and comments, we may not have anybody here that would be asking questions.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move that the Board of Education of District Number 15 adjourn.
All those in favor say aye. Oh, second, please.
That's fine. Aye.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.